You respond to last week's comments now?
Last meeting's comments.
Don't have any responses? Okay. So now we move on to the superintendent's report. Do you have a superintendent's report?
Excuse me, point of order. Could I comment publicly, please, in response to the comments that have been made here this evening and last week at the last meeting?
Board policy is, if we recognize the chair, Robert's Rules of Order, he can speak.
How long do you have?
Well, these are comments that I've put together over the holidays. They address several issues, and I would hope that I certainly would give the same consideration to any other board member that wanted to make serious comments about a number of issues, and so I would hope to have the same indulgence from.
How long do you think it's going to take you?
It's going to probably take 20 minutes, sir.
You can't do it during your comments at the end?
I would prefer to do it now because this is what I did at the last board meeting.
I'm okay with it. I don't care. I can stay here all night.
All right, thank you. And I want to say at the outset that I know I kind of see all of us as members of a big family, and we don't always agree on things. And I think we've got big issues, and I think in order to move forward, we have to get to the bottom of those issues, and that's where the friction is, and it's often difficult. I am going to read my statement for two reasons. One is, some of you know, I'm extremely dyslexic, and so this will kind of keep me on task, and also that way I won't stray off of the points that I've made. And so I will read my prepared remarks. At the last Board of Education meeting, many people raised concerns about the future of the district's biliteracy program. I want to address that, but first I want to clear up a possible ambiguity brought to my attention. Some individuals may think that when I speak for the board. Let me clarify. In my very, very, very short tenure on the Board of Education, I have never spoken for the board, nor have I even held such a thought. The Board of Education speaks through its majority vote, or in rare instances when the board agrees to allow one member to speak on its behalf, and those rare instances are often based on a vote as well. I would like to mention as an example, some of you may have picked up a flyer when you came into the room this evening. And this is a flyer that I've put out. This gives you some information about a website that I have. And on this website, I regularly post commentaries and thoughts that I have, and insights and questions that I have regarding Adams 14 and my job as a director on the board. But this does not represent the board's position on anything. But this is my effort to increase open communication, access, and accountability within the district. However, it is imperative to point out that when a member of the public speaks at a Board of Education meeting, that person comes before the Board of Education. It is the responsibility of the board to respond. In some instances, the board may ask the superintendent to respond for clarification, but never on their behalf. And as a board member, I reserve for myself the duty to respond to public questions and concerns, regardless of comments made by the superintendent or other board members. On a related matter, before the holiday break, I attended the Commerce City Council meeting with Superintendent Abrego and Chairman Archuleta. They presented the Chromebooks project and showed a short video. Their appearance at the council meeting had a positive impact, but I wouldn't have known about it unless I had read the council's agenda. I encourage our district to publicly announce these publicity events, even small ones, and then to give a shout out afterwards. It informs the public. It informs the public and builds goodwill. On the other hand, I am perplexed by the handling of the public relations around Beyond Textbooks, a program intended to help teachers with curricular development. I first heard about BT being Beyond Textbooks, last July. I asked Matt Schwartz if I could sit in on some training sessions. I was told that there wasn't room in the training sessions. My wife called BT in Arizona to see if we could travel to BT's headquarters and learn about the program. Justin at BT said, "Sure, but we're having a training in Adams 14 in August. We have visitors in our workshops all the time. Why don't you just come to that one and avoid the expense of a trip to Arizona?" So I called Matt back and asked if I could attend.
Can I get you to not say names, please?
All right. If I could attend without occupying a seat and computer terminal. I would stand in the back and just observe. He said okay, but then contacted me a few days later and said that the superintendent didn't want to get involved in politics since I was a candidate for the board at that time. I let slide the notion that the superintendent could remain impartial by allowing any of the other candidates to attend if they had requested it. The gentleman that I just referred to and I concluded our conversation with my willingness not to push further at that time for a BT demonstration, and that gentleman agreed to organize a public workshop on BT before the end of September 2017. Not only has the public BT workshop not been held, but I learned a few weeks ago that that gentleman has become in charge of post-secondary preparation. I assumed, incorrectly, that he had relinquished his BT role. And today, with his help, I have learned more about BT. But this running saga of my efforts to learn about the program is not indicative of an open, communicative organization. BT is probably the single greatest curricular change the superintendent is introducing. Wouldn't he want to publicize it? But maybe not. It competes with the benchmark biliteracy program adopted in 2015. The biliteracy program with benchmark materials was an adoption by the Board of Education directly related to the OCR, the Office of Civil Rights, and CDE, the College Department of Education. Approved the turnaround plan. Most perplexing of these two adopted curricula by our board is that they are opposed to one another, yet adopted by our board less than 2 years apart, with over $1 million spent on each of the two programs for materials. Just to be clear, the benchmark program is for biliteracy. Beyond Textbooks is English only. The superintendent and other district staff have mentioned to me that if I have questions, feel free to bring the questions to them. Our superintendent has stated publicly that he has an open door policy. That's as it should be, but most issues ought to be discussed in an open forum, such as the Board of Education meetings. For me to have a private conversation with the superintendent may address my questions or my personal curiosity, but I represent the people, and it is important that I ask openly and that the superintendent responds openly. With these communication issues put aside for now, I want to contribute to the dialogue regarding our biliteracy program. First, I want to state that this was probably the most frequently asked question from voters that I heard about during my campaign. There are at least 3 separate situations that need to be addressed. 1, basic definitions. Biliteracy and bilingualism are sometimes used interchangeably, confusing the debate. Bilingualism means that a person can speak and comprehend a spoken second language. Biliteracy is being bilingual plus being able to read, write, and learn in a second language on a professional level. 2, bilingualism ought to be lingual neutral, but it isn't. We assume that we are dealing with a Spanish-speaking student who is learning English, rather than with an English speaker who wants to learn Spanish. 3, biliteracy requires a much higher standard of achievement. For the district to encourage students to become biliterate requires a massive amount of resources, although the district has already made a large investment through its benchmark program, and many families may not place a priority on biliteracy. The superiority of a biliteracy program over what they call early exit approaches is well known, as reported upon last week and through reading research literature. I will not take time now to repeat that information, except to say that permanently closing the achievement gap occurs best with students enrolled in developmental biliteracy programs. In early exit programs known as Band-Aid approaches, or English language learner, that is to some extent advocated here in Adams 14 currently, students do more poorly than students in developmental programs. In exactly this vein, I would like to point out the distinction between the Office of Civil Rights mandate for biliteracy education and the duration of the contract with the Bueno Center. I think the superintendent may be confusing these points, and I want to say that because of our conversation in executive session, I might amend my comments slightly. These comments have been drafted over the last few weeks. Just because the current contract with the Bueno Center expires at the end of this year does not mean that the district's obligation to the Office of Civil Rights expires as well. In fact, it doesn't. They are separate matters. Rather than fly on our own, we ought to consider extending our contract with the Bueno Center. This whole issue of bilingual, biliterate programs need not be complex, but it becomes so when there is unclear direction from us on the board, ambiguous directives from the superintendent, and a community that is not of one mind. Since November 28, 2017, the superintendent has verbally offered 2 solutions, but nothing in writing has been given to the board. Additionally, these changes would be considered policy changes within the purview of the superintendent, but requires Board of Education approval, and the board will be the body held legally responsible. He stated that each school population is different and that each school should decide for itself what to do about biliteracy. That may be an alternative, but that is surrendering any district mandate, and done so without getting approval from the board, the CDE, or the OCR. The second suggestion by the superintendent is that parents and families have a responsibility to foster and develop their native language among their children, as if a school district has no federal mandate to do it. In fact, an ELL program is a federal legal obligation. It cannot be disregarded and pushed onto the parents. Our superintendent's comment that we are ready to fly on our own is indicative of his disregard of the mandate. Shifting slightly, I have some specific comments regarding the last board meeting in which a number of speakers had questions for the superintendent. I think it would allay the anxieties of many people if the superintendent offered point-to-point answers. I offer this proposal. First, according to public comments, the turnaround plan submitted to CDE mentions a full implementation of a K-5 biliteracy program, but does not appear anywhere in the Unified Improvement Plan. If that discrepancy is true, was it an administrative oversight? If so, I think a public acknowledgement of that error and publication of the correction would do a lot to reassure the public. If there wasn't any discrepancy between the two documents, I would like the specific section of the appropriate documents brought before this board. If the superintendent has veered away from the CDE-approved turnaround plan, I want to know what board action authorized the change. Board policy under file IG, curriculum development, states in part, quote, all new programs, as well as the elimination and extensive alteration of the content, shall be presented by the superintendent to the board for its consideration and action. I am not aware of any such presentation by the superintendent nor action by the Board of Education. Dr. Abrego has told the public that he will bring in an outside consultant to evaluate work environment and compliance with the Office of Civil Rights. I suggest that he request the Office of Civil Rights to review our situation. The Office of Civil Rights is far more familiar with our circumstances than any other third party. Instead of treating the OCR defensively, we should embrace their help. Through their technical assistance, they will help us do the right thing, and very importantly, they will do it for free. Why should we pay more money for someone else who is less familiar with the specifics of our situation? This is a waste of our taxpayer dollars. We all say that we are for the kids. As Director Quintana said in her swearing-in speech, the kids come first. Director Thomas has reminded us on a number of occasions we need to spend our dollars wisely. Well, let's not throw away our precious dollars. Let's use it for the kids. This hemorrhaging of dollars is not new. How many of you know that the district has paid out millions of dollars for personnel terminations? How many of you know that most of those cases involve non-disclosure agreements? This is not Guantanamo Bay. This is a public school district in the United States of America. If a person is if a person is terminated, it ought to be done properly. There should be no reason for paying off the person for the termination. Think what we could do with the money to hire more teachers or to buy more classroom materials. In my opinion, the board needs to reevaluate its own performance criteria as well as that of the superintendent. I have requested information from the district on whatever evaluative instruments the board has used in the past for its own self-evaluation and for its evaluation of the superintendent. I encourage the board to hold workshops as soon as possible to review and possibly improve those documents and to conduct evaluations of itself and of the superintendent. Both of these activities should be ongoing tasks. I would like to return to a public comment made at the last meeting and this evening by Mr. Serna. I thought his suggestion of the board commissioning a task force to examine the community's stance of biliteracy was excellent. While it may take such a process a few months to play out, I am emphatic about the superintendent sticking to the original CDE plan until the board has approved any changes. And I think it is prudent for the board to hold in abeyance any change in policy until the appointed committee has concluded its work and the board has revised some of its own major decisions. For example, the benchmark program, which the district adopted in 2015, if I'm correct, should not be abandoned when it was so recently installed. And now beyond textbooks, which is another big ticket item, is pulling in a different direction. 2 years ago, the board adopted an OCR-approved K-5 biliteracy program, spent over $1 million for benchmark materials for grades K through 5, and approved the hiring of personnel to implement a rigorous ELL program. Subsequent to that time, the board has presided over the dismantling of this directive. It hired a superintendent with little ELL experience from Arizona, which happens to be the only state in the country with mandated English-only instruction. Under the current administration, our district is emphasizing beyond textbooks and English-only curriculum over the benchmark materials, placing the key ELL staff person on administrative leave, abrogating district-level responsibility for developmental biliteracy programs, and verbally encouraging school site decisions to put early exit programs into place. In closing, I must state that I believe these issues arise as they do because we lack the big three: good communication, accountability, and transparency. Furthermore, we have a superintendent who has a defensive style rather than a cooperative style. District staff are told not to respond to inquiries from its own Board of Education and from organizations outside the district. Requests for information from board members must go through one person, the secretary for the board, creating a bottleneck. For me, as treasurer of the board, not to be able to talk directly with the district's financial managers and accountants makes routine correspondence very cumbersome, to say the least. The defensive style of our superintendent fosters an atmosphere of retaliation, does not encourage open discussion, and shuts down transparency. Prosecuting a messenger for the message is ill-advised. To claim that a messenger is the source of unrest is to deny the underlying reality. To advance as a system, we need strong school leaders, ones who are open to criticism and able to address these critiques in a positive and constructive manner. It is the board's job to articulate the characteristics that we want modeled by our superintendent. No matter how many times we say we have open communications in our administration and in our school district, does not make it so. And for anyone who doubts that, here's some evidence from just a few days ago. Well, now it's a few weeks ago. The news headline referring to Adams 14 reads, quote, "This Colorado school district was supposed to be a model for advancing biliteracy. Now it's scaling back," end quote. As a board member, I am embarrassed to be learning about my district through the news media. Not only do we have a communication problem, but we now have gained a big public relations headache as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hyde. Moving forward, consent items need a motion for.
We with superintendent's report?
I asked you if you had a superintendent's report.
We did have, he was ready, but
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. So let's go back to the superintendent's report then. Thanks, Matt.
Good evening, President Archuleta, Superintendent Abrego, and distinguished board members of Adams 14. My name is Matt Schwartz, and I serve Adams 14 in a dual role. I'm the BT liaison for the district, as well as interim director of secondary. It's my pleasure to present to you this evening on our second update regarding Beyond Textbooks. So Adams 14, I'm going to go back a little bit. Adams 14 enlisted Beyond Textbooks as our external partner last April. And you'll see we started off with the leadership retreat. BT 101, which occurred in August. BT 102 was this morning, and Reteach and Enrich was this afternoon for our BT schools. A quick overview of each of these types of trainings. Leadership retreat involved action planning for BT implementation with the school leaders and their site, and teachers involved with that as well. BT 101 was exploring the BT website, emphasizing curriculum calendar, unwrapped documents, BT formative assessments. So there was some familiarity with the BT website for teachers. BT 102, which as recent as today, this morning, more continued review on BT, exploration of the BT website, posting of lessons, how to do that, reflections of success, challenges, and some goals that people have moving forward with regards to BT. This afternoon, Reteach and Enrich, to give you a little oversight on that, or summary, reviewing the purpose of Reteach and Enrich, master schedule with Reteach and Enrich embedded. It does require about 30 minutes every day of Reteach and Enrich, grade level data meetings, formal processes for brainstorming as a school. So they participated in some of that work this afternoon. Along with the trainings, Beyond Textbooks has provided Adams 14 with site visits. So they've done 3 of these so far. One of those occurred on September 14th and 15th. This was sort of an initial assessment of the schools. Site visit 2 was progress monitoring. So they kind of determined what those next steps were at each of the sites, areas of focus. And site visit 3, they continued to monitor those next steps. The site visits included, I apologize, I'm going back. 1 second. I think that's my next page. So on our last visit, this was the debrief session that Beyond Textbooks provides us with, and the principal as well at each of their sites. So for Adams City High School, some of the positives they see going on: classroom management, there's some improvement, questioning strategies, student engagement, Reteach and Enrich was tied to the core classes, rigor and proficiency. So when you look over here at the right-hand side, it speaks more to continue to refine. So they're saying more consistent school-wide approach.
Matt, can I get you to hold on a second if these folks are leaving?
I apologize.
Thank you.
And just mention that we want to be
Chairman?
doing-
Mr. Chairman, are there other people in the other room?
I don't know yet. If there's anybody in the overflow room that would like to come in and listen to the presentations or the rest of the board meeting, please feel welcome to come in. Thank you. Thanks, Matt. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No worries. Thank you. So going back to Adams City High School, so questioning strategies, they commented this has been improving. Want to see more consistent improvement. So when you look at all the areas of focus for Adams City High School, they notice improvements, but we're still moving on that. So another part of that, refine, reteaching, and enrich. Geometry in particular has some struggles getting that into their schedule. I believe the high school has been working on correcting that over the break as we move into our second semester. And increasing relevancy, those are those real-world applications within a classroom. So,
Just a second, Matt.
real-world applications, those are those real-world models within classes to improve the instruction. I'm going to wait for one more moment. Is there anyone? This next slide is a summary from the BT site team on Central and Rose Hill. So just touching on a few things from Central: friendly, welcoming campus, questioning techniques were some of the positives, posting of objectives, display of essential questions, class sizes are optimal. Some of their areas of focus: classroom management, plans for positive behavior consequences. So they wanted to see more positive reinforcement with regards to just behaviors within the classroom that are optimal during teaching. Lack of signals as a routine in class. This has to do, I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to be in some of our classrooms, but some teachers can literally transition through a classroom based on hand signals and hardly speaking to move kids from one activity into another. It's fantastic to see. They're just trying to get more consistency and refinement throughout the school. There was a lack of engagement. So along with those signals and those transitions, would like to see more of that involved with the student engagement piece as well. And no obvious use of assessment data. Reteach and Enrich kind of addresses some of that on procedures on how to work with kids that aren't getting it, and next steps for kids that already do have it. What do you do with them? Rose Hill, BT is fully implemented school-wide, procedures and routines improving. Principal and assistant principal have been extremely active with making this happen with the procedures and routines. Consistent instructional framework and posting of objectives. When you look at focus areas, CLO, there's confusion between a content language objective and a beyond textbook objective. So teachers have some confusion, they're posting both. We're trying to get a CLO only. Continue to improve procedures and routines in all classrooms, refine that, increase student engagement, and have models within the school. That would be that model classroom that does that fantastic. Get teachers over there so they can see that, and update your school website. Continue to keep that updated. Our next slide, Kemp, they have 5th grade beyond textbooks, and Hanson Elementary has been moving more into a school-wide type model over there. They had very similar type positives. Kemp, friendly campus, students and staff, content language objectives are consistently posted. Teacher procedures and routines, rapport with students. Both of them, let me jump over to Hanson's positives as well. Friendly welcoming campus, posting of objectives, display of essential questions, so they have a few more. Class sizes are optimal over there. Desire for BT at Hanson from the entire staff. So this was something I actually received a request from their teachers asking for BT login information a few weeks, about a month ago at least. Their areas of focus are very similar. An instructional framework, that's what BT provides. Mismatch of objectives and activities, so whatever you say should match whatever you do. So there's some inconsistency there, and that increase for rigor. Rigor is difficulty, making sure that it maintains grade level mastery and maintains those expectations. A summary of all of our schools. So when you look at things, you kind of have to always look at that district 30,000-foot view of how things look. So positives from our district overall that they concluded: objectives posted. All sites are implementing BT protocols. That's BT formative assessment, scope and sequence, and reteach and enrich. Even though we just really received that training today, they've all tried to put in that structure. And they all look at data to see how we can improve. Focus areas that they highlighted: every school leader is fully in tune with their focus areas. So BT, when they came back to us, they said, wow, like the principal and her team over at Adams City High School are very in tune with the areas that they want to improve on, that were highlighted by the BT site visit team. Same with Rose Hill. You hear that from Central and Hanson and Kemp as well. Improving the procedures and routines school-wide. So that's something that our district just brought in, some things to sort of add to that with Kagan training just yesterday. Improving questioning strategies. Again, Kagan training does address some of that as well that we just had yesterday. Increased structured student engagement strategies. That really is what Kagan is student engagement and optimizing that within lessons, and improving the use of data to guide instruction and the use of reteach and enrich time. So this is an ongoing piece that we always are looking to improve. Doesn't matter where you teach, you're always looking at data, you're always trying to determine where you can improve. So looking at this slide right here, this slide speaks to the accountability of our partnership with Beyond Textbooks and our turnaround plan with the state, with the Colorado Department of Education. So as you can see, there are 6 different site visits from the BT team throughout the school year. We have several different trainings with Leadership Retreat, BT 101, BT 102. We have Reteach and Enrich, and our last training that we'll receive from them is the PLC model. So moving forward, these are the remaining more isolated for the remainder of this year. We have 2 more site visits. We'll have a PLC model, and then we have site visit 6 in late April. I wanted to highlight, as I wrap this presentation up, highlight some of our rock stars here within Adams 14. So I've had the privilege of being able to see some of these people teach every week, but it's really nice to hear from the BT site team, and I wanted to recognize some of the people that left lasting impressions. So Tiffany Cockhorst from Rose Hill, they highlighted her. You want to stand? She happens to be here tonight. Alejandro Armenta. He is a 5th grade teacher over at Kemp Elementary that I had the privilege of teaching with years ago. A couple from Central, Ramona Olevis and Dolores Bodkin. There were 3 over at Adams City High School, and I think it's Joe Maloney, Glenn Sands, and Tyler Ambrosi. They were all recognized by them. One of our other things that's new about BT is Hanson Elementary just received training and kind of got caught up on many of the trainings that they didn't have at the beginning of the year that were exclusive more to school-wide anyway, exclusive to Central and Rose Hill and Adams City High School. So Justin Chesbrough, the director of Beyond Textbooks, took time this afternoon and got the Hanson staff caught up with, as a school, some of the trainings that they had missed. Do you have any questions that I can answer for you?
Yes, I got questions, please.
You bet.
And I don't want to put you on the spot, but I pulled up the last presentation you gave the Board of Education on the
Okay.
10th,
Yes.
and I looked at Rose Hill focus areas.
Yes.
And we have 4. And we got 4 today. You had 6 then, and 4 out of the 6 is still on today's. So I'm trying to figure out for myself, how is it that you had 6, you lost 2, but 4 of them are the same 4, and it's showing me that, at least myself, that we're not improving if we're doing some October to today. Then I went to Central focus areas.
Yes.
You got 5. You can go to that slot, that page.
Yeah, I can flip back there. Back. Right here.
Yeah. In the presentation you gave us on October the 10th,
Yes.
the focus areas are the same 5. So my question is, if the focus areas are the same 5 3 months ago, what are we not doing to improve those? And if I'm not mistaken, and this is public record, those 2 schools are percentages are the lowest in the district, and the focus areas hasn't changed, and we got the same wording. And then Rose Hill got 4 up there, they had 6, but those 4 is still are the same. So we not doing something with BT, or it's not matching, something ain't right.
I hear you and understand what you're referring to. So going back to these slides, and I'll speak more to Rose Hill in particular. What I do is I take what the BT site team brings back to us as their summary information, and that's what winds up right here. So verbatim, I'll take theirs and put it into ours. Rose Hill's positives started at 6, you're exactly right, and then changed, and then this last time, Justin listed 4 and had dropped.
But the same 4 are the same for 3 months ago.
Yes.
The same 5.
On the areas of focus or
Right,
the
I'm just
positives?
staying on focus. Because area of focus is what we need to correct.
Yes.
Areas of focus is what we need to do better in accountability.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
if the same 4 out of 6 is up there, and then in Central you got the same 5 from 3 months ago, what are we as a district not doing? Because
Well, I will say, as a former assistant principal and principal in a school, when I look at our areas of focus throughout our district, when I see them at any of the individual schools, most of them require the course of a year. And I will speak pretty frankly, with high turnover, you're retraining the new people on engagement strategies. You're going to reteach them on questioning strategies all the time. So when I look at something like classroom management, that's something that has to come within the school through the principal, through the assistant principal, that administration, to determine what is our classroom management. BT tells us and has shared with us each time that they see improvement in these areas, but they want more. So that's why the areas have remained the same, because until we close those deals, they're going to stay. Some of them, they sound like they should be really easy. The other thing that I know our elementary schools battle for is time. We have very limited time for professional development with our elementary schools. So it looks easy, but if I don't get a lot of FaceTime, or if it's once a week or once every other week that I get 45 minutes, I can go over, student engagement activities with the staff, but it also takes time for that teacher to become comfortable using those student engagement activities with the many other things that we do have people doing in our schools. So I know it's not the answer you want to hear.
No,
I know you'd like to see it move faster.
No, I'm not saying I want it to move faster. It's not the answer I want to hear. My question again is, 3 months ago, Central, classroom management plans for positive behavior consequences. That was 3 months ago. And the same 5 focus of areas is back. So it's either we not doing something as a district, or we not doing something to help the teachers to get what they need to get. Because if Rose Hill knocked 2 out of the 6 off, they did something correct.
Yes.
So my question is, what are we doing, since you are the director, that we not doing to help these teachers get to the level they need to be at?
Well, I think professional development is huge to get teachers where they need to be. Some of that went on just yesterday, so we're limited with how many of those days we have and those opportunities we have with staff in elementary and secondary levels to be able to put out Kagan strategies that actually address signaling routines in classrooms, student engagement. That training in particular can address, to some degree, 3 of those different areas. So limited with time, and structurally in a calendar, if we don't have professional development time, it's really hard for us from a school system to get out and address those.
Well, see, I know for a fact board policy states that the calendar for 18-19 should be approved before January 31st.
Okay.
So am I mistaken to not know that PD is not going to be in there? Because you're telling us in 2 weeks, when we have a board meeting, by board policy, the calendar for next year is going to be presented to the Board of Education that you want us to vote on. Now I'm sitting here understanding to myself that we need more PD for our teachers that's not getting it. So I'm lost somewhere. I'm kind
Well, it's a balance. I mean, I know that when you start to look at the calendar, you have a number of days teachers are here contractually, and then you have a number of days that they're here for student contact time, which leaves you this many days, and then you have to determine breaks and whatnot. But I'm always a proponent of having as many professional development days as I could have in a calendar.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Schwartz?
Yes.
I have a number of questions, and I wanted to mention at the outset that you've addressed some of them during the day when I was with you this afternoon, and I appreciate that. I would like to go at least raise some of these, but first I'd like to kind of follow up on Mr. Thomas's statement, because I hadn't thought of it myself, but I think he's raised a good point. And just for heuristic purposes, let's look at focus under Central Elementary, the focus areas,
Okay.
the difference between an item such as 4 and an item such as 5. Now, in your comments, I think you're saying that the students are going to change, and the scenario changes, and so some of those focal areas are going to be perennial issues.
Yes.
But something, and I think Mr. Thomas was trying to get at was maybe more obvious with the number 5, where you say there's no obvious use of assessment data. Now I assume that's addressing the use of the data by the teachers, not by the students. And so now I suppose you could have turnover in teachers also, but I think and I'd love to have you chip in, if I've got it wrong, but I think he was trying to get at the question of if the teachers were not using assessment data 3 months ago, has anything been done in the interim to try to get the teachers to use assessment data, or has it not been addressed, or has the address been ineffective?
I think some of that was addressed today with Reteach and Enrich. So when you're looking at use of assessment data, the two questions really, or the two pieces that Beyond Textbooks focuses on is, what are you going to do for Matt who didn't get it? So there's that plan on Reteach. And then there's the other part, what are you going to do for Mr. Thomas who did get it? He's already proficient, but he's just not going to sit over here and do, play or whatever. We're going to continue to push on that. So that's what schools were involved with this afternoon, with conversations around. They're taking a BT formative assessment, that 5-question test. They're trying to come up with some efficiencies around resorting kids for that 30-minute reteach, but they're also trying to figure out what are the strategies that I'm going to implement with Matt, who doesn't get it still, and with Mr. Thomas, who already has it. So that's where we're at. That's teaching, and it's the nuts and bolts of what teachers do every day, all the time. It's as our presenter said, if all your kids were 5s or getting all 5 of those questions right all the time, you really probably wouldn't have much to do.
Right.
And that is the science of teaching right there, is how do I use that information? And that's what teachers grapple with. That's what principals grapple with every day.
Sure, thank you.
You bet.
How about, I'd like to go back to, I think, slide number 6. And that's where you said there's, the site visit includes an assessment of the school. And I wanted to know if there's a rubric or a checklist that's used for those assessments, and whether well, I guess that's the first question, and then I'll follow up with others.
You know what, Dr. Hyde, I will have to get back to you on that and some of the look-fors. I can't remember all of them, but I do remember them mentioning something along the lines of appearance of the school and some of these types of things. But I'll have to get back to you.
And I just want to give you a heads up, because my follow-up question on that particular assessment and whether there's a checklist or not is, I would be very curious to know whether it's a subjective or objective checklist. For example, I was really surprised to see that warm and inviting was listed under, in the left-hand column, under positives, and I was thinking of BT as being an objective, cognitive, evaluative tool, and that was the reason that the district had a contract, and that I didn't know that it was going to go into the affective domain. And why did warm and inviting stand out as opposed to clean or tidy or other affective measures? So that would be my follow-up on that. But let me just set that aside. So,
Okay.
But when you look into it, that maybe keep that in the back of your mind.
Generally speaking, I think it was a combination of the two, but
Okay.
I will get back
Yeah.
to you, definitely.
On the, I think in the next couple slides, you mentioned think partners work with debriefing with the principal. What is a think partner?
Well, Think Partner is kind of what we engaged in this afternoon. over with Reteach and Enrich. So a Think Partner is really that person that you can bounce ideas off of, and almost to go along with the training from yesterday, how maybe I can share something and it takes you to another level up. It takes our idea and raises the ideas basically within the school as you're always problem solving on how to improve.
Are Think Partners self-selected, or are they designated by someone other than oneself?
A Think Partner, basically, I would say it can be both. And so in our particular model with our site visit team, Brent Edwards and Matt Donaldson are two of our BT site team people for Adams City High School, and they act as Think Partners with the principal as they brainstorm different things that they may be struggling with, and they are able to provide them with ideas that other schools have used in maybe other states, or even within their own district.
Okay, thanks. Under Central Elementary, it was mentioned that class size was optimal. What is that referring to? A certain number of students per class?
Well, it's interesting. You know, when I am in schools, when I'm over at Central, oftentimes class sizes, when I count students out, will, you know, on primary grades tend to hover somewhere around 22.
So you think
Now
that's
there
what
could be
it's
some
referring to
absent,
there?
but yeah, when I count heads in the room, it's 21, sometimes down in the teens if I'm, you know, in a first grade or kinder classroom. So, you know, beyond textbooks, thought, you know, that's a nice class size. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, my next to last question here is, if we look at, if you want to, could you maybe turn to the Central Rose Hill slide? It's
Let me go back the other way.
it's about 8 or 9, I think.
There you go.
Yeah, and I was taken by, I didn't know really quite what to make of it. The third positive for Central says posting of objectives, and then under focus area, under 4, it says students unable to articulate objectives. And so obviously the objectives are being posted, although I don't know what that really amounts to, but let's say they're posted. But the students are not articulating the objectives. So what's the missing link between those two?
Good question. Typically, the idea behind that is that if the objective is that I know how to do this, whatever this is, and demonstrate it in this way by the end of the lesson, the idea behind that is that the student knows what it is they're supposed to be learning during that lesson, can tell you about it, and can tell you how they're going to show you that they know that. So that would be a student being able to articulate the objective.
For a classroom teacher, what would be the remedy?
To start adding that relevancy piece to students so they understand what that objective is. I've seen people have students read the objective with them so they know exactly what they're learning for that day. I've seen teachers highlight the specific concepts and the skills within that objective with the students. The key there, or the remedy, is with the students. If I just go up there and read that objective and walk off, they're probably not going to be able to really tell me, or they might look over and read it off of the board, and if you ask them what that means, they're not going to be able to really tell you. So it's the role of the teacher to say what this is, but to also make it friendly for the students so they kind of understand what it is they're learning.
Thank you. I'll forego my last question. I appreciate all your help.
Send it to me later.
Okay, thanks so much for
I
your
got,
help.
I got
You're
one
welcome.
question before you
Yes.
leave. When I went to Dupont, and board policy states BBA, to visit schools and observe instructions. So I went to almost 90% of the classes. Now, now I know Dupont don't have BP. Some of them, they probably don't.
They don't.
They
You're
don't.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I just want,
Okay.
I'm gonna bring this up at,
Okay.
later. Thank
Okay.
you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
You're welcome.
You guys need a break? Moving on to personnel items. Need a motion for superintendent's recommendation under 1.0.
Motion.
Motion for approval.